Charlie Munger has this interesting concept that he calls inversion, which basically says try to solve a problem or answer a question through a process of elimination or by reversing or inverting the problem. So, one way to think about this is instead of asking, what do I need to do to succeed? You can ask, well, what can I avoid doing that often leads to failure? And then success is all that's left. So, in terms of investing, it can be that people over leverage, take on too much debt, take on too much risk, try to time the market, uh, keep on selling whenever the market dips and losing money that way, making too many trades and paying all those fees and taxes, and so on. So then inversion would be the opposite of all of that, which is to say, invest in something broad like an index fund. Don't try to time the market. So just keep investing, keep buying, and just hold for as long as you can. And then wait a long time and let compound interest do its thing. Make very few trades overall. And just see the money grow over time. Don't have any individual input. Don't pick your stocks. Don't try to time the market. Don't sell when stocks go down. And there you have it. You have a recipe for success, which just takes patience and discipline. And you can apply this idea of inversion to any thought process for basically any field. So if you're asking yourself, like I might ask myself, okay, how can I be a successful YouTuber? Well, okay, let's look at what unsuccessful YouTubers do. They don't post consistently. All right, so I better post consistently. They don't learn from previous videos. Okay, so I have to learn from previous videos. And so on. You can kind of go down the list and you can keep looking at what don't they do. There's, I think, a similar lesson from this book I was reading called Unreasonable Hospitality that basically talked about how this guy wanted to get his restaurant from number 50 in the world to number one in the world. And he took his team to some of the best restaurants in the world. But rather than looking at what those restaurants were doing well, they looked at what the restaurants were doing poorly. In a way, they inverted their criteria. And then they decided they were going to excel at the things that those restaurants were doing poorly. So those restaurants had pretty average coffee and pretty poor beer service and beer selection. So he basically appointed a coffee sommelier and a beer sommelier for his own restaurant. And these people became experts in their field. And thus their restaurant was the only, top-rated Michelin restaurant that had amazing coffee and amazing beer. And now I think a lot of restaurants have copied them, which is kind of funny. But I think this kind of thinking can be unintuitive at first. But once you get used to it, what you start to realize is that this makes so much more sense to begin looking at failure points rather than success points. And then just shore up all of the failure points that you can find, and success is inevitable at that point, right? If you've basically covered for every possible way that things can go bad, then things won't go bad unless you discover a new way for things to go bad through your own example. But then you can just fix that and keep moving forward. So it's completely fine. The other interesting thing about this is that it's a lot easier to find failure and it's a lot easier to think of the ways in which things can go wrong. That's kind of how our brains are wired. We were wired to figure out, that's what anxiety is, right? And worry. It's thinking about all the ways in which things can go wrong. Our brains are designed to look out for these ways in which things can break. And so because it's an easier way of doing it, it means you can come up with you can brainstorm a lot quicker. You can come up with a lot more potential problems than you can solutions, which is good because then you can figure out how to avoid each of those. It's kind of an interesting idea. If you're starting a business, look at your competitors, and rather than copying what they're doing well, just ask what are they doing really poorly. Look at their one-star reviews and see what they're saying, and then go like, okay, can I make a business that would never get these 10 types of one-star reviews because it would never do that thing poorly, that all of my other competitors are doing poorly. And then suddenly you rise above your competition through differentiation. Whereas if you just copied what they were doing, you wouldn't be any different. You would be a commodity. But instead, by taking all the things they're doing poorly and doing them excellently, you become one of a kind. And that's how you end up not being a commodity. And when you aren't a commodity, you can charge any price that you like effectively, because you're no longer being compared with on price, you become one of a kind.